Perek Chavdalad Mishnah Hey. This is the last Mishnah in Mesechus Shabbos. This Mishnah deals with various Isurei D'Rabbanan which are actually mutter to do on Shabbos because it enables the performance of certain mitzvahs, as we will see in Hashem. Says the Mishnah, Meifirin Nedarim b'Shabbos. We are allowed to annul oaths on Shabbos, v'nish'ol nidvarim shehin tzorech Shabbos. And we can be shoyel, we can seek a release from those nedarim which are l'tzorech Shabbos. So a bit of background. The first section of Meifir Nedarim b'Shabbos refers to two types of neder. Either a neder that a young girl made from the age of 11 through to 12 and a half, and there the father has the ability to be meifir those nedarim. He can be meifir, he can undo the nedarim that his daughter made aged between 11 and 12 and a half. The second type of neder that the Mishnah refers to are the nedarim a wife made, and again the husband has the ability to undo those nedarim, to be meifir her nedarim, so long as they are either involved in inui nefesh, i.e. they afflicted her physically, for example, she made a neder not to eat, or they were dvarim beinoi leveino, that she made some sort of neder which affected their relationship, and either of those types of nedarim he is allowed to be meifir. This is the open psukim in Parshas Matzos and Bamidbar, Perek Lamed. Now, the pasuk says that in both of those cases, a father vis-a-vis his daughter's nedarim, or a husband vis-a-vis his wife's nedarim, has only got b'yoyim shamay, the day on which he hears these nedarim. Now, the standard opinion, if you like, in the Gemara is that that means not 24 hours, but rather it means until sunset of that day. So therefore, if he hears the neder the night before, of course from a Jewish day it always starts nightfall through to sunset. So if he hears the night before, then he's got almost 24 hours to be made for the neder. If he hears late, very late in the afternoon, a few minutes before Shkia, he'll only have a few minutes to be made for the neder. He's only got until sunset to do it, until the end of that day. Now, therefore, even though generally speaking, the Mishnayos in the 9th Perek of Nedarim discuss it, that he generally speaking, you cannot be made for a neder on Shabbos. However, since he's got a limited time of how to do it, Chazal allowed him to be made for the neder, either for his daughter's nedarim or for his wife's nedarim. Now, with regard, there is, however, one other opinion, and the Gemara presents another opinion that 24 hours, b'yom shalom, means actually 24 hours. And according to that opinion, he still will have time to be made for the neder after Shabbos. If he heard the neder say Shabbos morning, he can do it through till Sunday morning. So why do we allow that now? So therefore, we've got, says the Gemara, we've got to be referring to nedarim that had some sort of impact on Shabbos. It sort of restricted their ability to enjoy Shabbos. But either way, however the Gemara learns, the husband or the father is able to be made for these nedarim on Shabbos. Then the Mishnah continues, "V'nishal nedarim shehin l'tzorech Shabbos." You're allowed to undo nedarim which are l'tzorech Shabbos. So that's a different category. For example, a person made a neder which has a bearing on Shabbos. For example, he made a neder, I'm never going to eat chulant, kigel, or something on Shabbos again. And since that affects his, that's a tzorech Shabbos, as it were. So therefore, if he regrets that neder, he is allowed to go to a chacham or to go to a basin of 3 regular people and to be meifir that neder. Now, ordinarily, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. You can't be meifir, you can't be shoel on your neder on Shabbos. Why not? Well, 2 possible problems. Number 1, it resembles a din Torah, because you're either going in front of a yochid mumcha, an expert, or you're going in front of a basin of 3, and it looks like you're involved in a din Torah. So Chazal said you should not be shoel a neder on Shabbos. Alternatively, the problem is that since you've got longer, you've got beyond Shabbos to do it, you can be made for the neder tomorrow or in a few days' time. What you're doing now is mimtzoi chefzecha, is your own personal desires. And that violates the pasuk which we mentioned before of mimtzoi chefzecha. So either way, you should not generally be made for neder on Shabbos. However, if the neder is a l'tzorech Shabbos, it revolves around something which enhances your enjoyment of Shabbos, Chazal allowed you to do it, that you could be shoel on the dvarim which are l'tzorech Shabbos. Continues the Mishnah. Poikakin es hama'or. You're allowed to stop up a window on Shabbos. This is something which we mentioned in Perek Yud Zayin, Mishnah Zayin, that in those days, in the times of Chazal, the windows were just like an open hole in the wall. And the people would have sort of boards that you would stop up the window with. And even though it may resemble being moisif ala binyan, it looks like you're adding on to a binyan and therefore the problems of boine on Shabbos. However, we allow you to, it says the Mishnah, it's not a problem of moisif ala binyan, and therefore you are allowed to be poikek es hama'or, you're allowed to stop up the window on Shabbos. Umoidin es hamatlis, we are allowed to measure a matlis, which is like a piece of material, a patch of cloth, Ve'es ha-mikveh, and you're allowed to measure a mikveh. And again, medida on Shabbos is generally not allowed because it's an uvda dechol. It's like a weekday activity to measure things. However, if there is some mitzvah purpose for it, it's allowed. For example, to be moeded the matlis to know whether or not it's makabel tumah. For example, a sheretz, a rat or something touched this piece of material, and this material went in turn and touched some fruit or some food. If the matlis, this patch, is 3 by 3 etzbois, then 3 by 3 finger breadths, then the actual matlis will become tomei, and in turn will be matame, the food. If, however, it's less than 3 by 3, it won't be matame. So therefore, one is allowed to measure. You can take your ruler out and measure it on Shabbos to check whether it became tomei or not. Similarly, a mikveh. If a person wanted to use a mikveh on Shabbos, then he wants to check whether this mikveh is kosher. How do we know? He wants to check whether it has the minimum shiur, i.e. 40 sa'ah of water. And he can take some measuring rod and check whether or not it has 40 sa'ah. So even though medida is not allowed, the tzorech mitzvah, for the two examples we gave, would be permitted. Concludes the Mishnah. Umaisa b'mei oviv shel Rabbi Tzadok. An incident once happened in the days of the father of Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Tzadok, of course, was the Tana who lived towards the very end of Bayis Sheni. He fasted for 40 years, the Gemara says in Hanizokin, towards the last 40 years before Churban Bayis Sheni. So in the days of his father, Uvimei Abba Shaul ben Botnis, and in the days of Abba Shaul ben Botnis, Shepokaku es ha'ma'or b'tofiach. They stopped up a window b'tofiach with an earthenware jug, v'koshru es ha'makeda b'gemi, and they tied a cup with a bit of animal food, which we'll explain in a second, later in yesh bagigis peseach tefach enough, to ascertain whether or not in this gigis there was an opening of a tefach. Now, what was going on? There are slight variations how to explain it, but this is the general gist of the following story. There was a house over here, and in that house there was a person who was very, very ill, and they realized that his demise was very soon, that he was going to die very soon. Now, the halacha is that if a person dies, of course, anyone who touches him is tomei. But not only that, there is tumas oihel, which means that anything in the roof, in the house, is going to become tomei. So, not only that, there was a window in this house. And next to the window there was an alleyway. And next to the alleyway there was another house. So the people in this house over here, in the second house, were worried. They knew that there was a person who was going to die very soon in this first house. And they were worried that the tumah would transmit all the way through to their house. How? Well, if he were to die, the tumah would go through. There was a window in the first house. It would travel through the window. And in the alleyway, there was a gigis. There was this vat, this big barrel, which was an ohel over the alleyway and connected the two houses. So the tumah would transmit through the first house, through the alleyway, and through the window of this second house into the second house, and it would be matame, things in the second house. So the people in the second house did the following. They took an earthenware jug and they stopped up the window. So that would straight away break the possibility of tumah coming through into the second house. Now, why? How could they do that? Because a jug, an earthenware jug, a kli cheres which is open, only becomes tomei from the inside of the jug. But they turned it around and they faced the bottom of the jug against the window, facing the alleyway. So therefore, the tumah would not be able to go through the alleyway into that house. It was sort of stopped over there by the bottom of the jug. So that put things on hold. However, they were worried that later on they wanted to take away the jug, they wanted to use their window. So they realized there's another way of, if you like, stopping the tumah going through. How? As I mentioned, the alleyway was covered with this gigis, with this vat, this big barrel. and there was a break in the barrel, there was a hole in it. And the halacha is this: if the break is more than a tefach, then the tumah will not be transmitted through because there is no ohel. If, however, there is less than a tefach, then that is still considered a proper covering, and it would be an ohel connecting the two homes. So they wanted to check whether or not there was a tefach gap in the vat above the alleyway. So what they did was, they took a cup which measured exactly a tefach, they tied it to the top of a pole or some rod with gemi, which is some sort of animal fodder, which means that it would not be a kesher shel kayoma. It wasn't a permanent knot. It was only a temporary knot, because eventually you wanted to untie it to use this animal fodder to feed the animals. So therefore, that was an assurance that it wouldn't be a kesher shel kayoma. So they tied this cup with this gemi onto the rod, and they put it up just to check whether or not the split was a tefach or not. And says the Mishnah, therefore, umidvreihem lomadnu, from their words we can learn shepoikakin, that you're allowed to stop up, i.e. you could take this jug and you could stop up the window or this hole to make sure that tumah wouldn't come in. Umoidadin, and that you're also allowed to measure, because they had to measure to make sure that this cup was exactly a tefach, to see whether or not there was a gap of a tefach at the top, to see if there was a tefach split, that the tumah would be transmitted or not. V'koishrin b'Shabbos, and you're allowed to tie this cup to the top of the rod with a kesher midrabanon. It wouldn't be a kesher shel kayoma, it was only a knot which was also midrabanon. And these rabbinic restrictions were waived for these mitzvah purposes. That is the end of Mishnah Hey and the end of Mishnah of Perek Chaf Daled. Hadrun aloch Mesechus Shabbos Hadrun aloch. I'd just like to take this opportunity to make 2 points. First of all, to say a big shkoyach at the end of this Masechta to all of you who have listened. I have no idea who is listening, how many are listening, but for those who are listening, a big shkoyach for your limud haTorah, and wish you much hatzlacha in Mishnayos and in all other learning and everything else. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the brainchild of Mishnah.me, Jonathan Weiss, who is behind the scenes. He keeps a low profile, but all of this is really his work, and it was his idea, and he puts tremendous efforts into it, and together with the help of his wonderful father Nati, they have created this wonderful internet site and tremendous limud haTorah berabim, and I wish them both, together with their family, much hatzlacha and continued success with their habotzas haTorah. Thank you.